Just pull up my notes real quick. So, and I believe the recording has started.
Yes, the recording has started.
Okay, thank you so much. We'll explain for the public audience what's going on, who's on the call, and how votes will be made. So today, the Arts Commission Committee for Anti-Racism and Equity and Metro Arts staff are joining by a conference call. In a moment, we will call roll of all members present. This meeting is being recorded and will be made available to the public no later than 48 hours after the meeting. Any action items decided by consensus at today's meeting will be reconfirmed at our next in-person meeting of the committee. So I will be calling the meeting to order. And as I am taking roll call, we will have the care group norms on the screen as well, so we can reflect that. So for each committee member, I'm going to call your name, and please say if you're present. Aaron?
Here.
Ellen?
Here.
John?
Present.
Megan? Will?
Present.
Perfect. Thank you all. We also have a guest today. I want to recognize and welcome Council Member Joy Stiles of District 32. She is also a member of the Metro Council Committee for Parks, Library, and Arts and Recreation. And she's a big supporter of the Arts Commission. So welcome, Council Lady Stiles. I will now call for a motion that this meeting.
You're muted.
Who?
Oh, sorry. Councilmember Stiles.
Council Lady, okay.
I was on mute while I was talking. Forgive me. Again, it's delightful to be with you all. And as of yesterday, I am now the vice chair for Library, Parks, and Arts. So I am very much looking forward to creating some great partnership between the committee and Metro Arts and figuring out how we can be more cohesive moving forward and really focused on our creative world here in Nashville. It's so vast and so rich.
Yes, you're welcome. Thank you. So I will now call for a motion that the meeting agenda constitutes essential business of this body, and meeting electronically is necessary to protect the health, safety, and welfare of Tennesseans considering the COVID-19 outbreak, and is permitted under the governor's executive order number 16. So I'll need someone to propose the motion. If you'll say your name.
Megan Kelly.
Okay, thank you, Megan. I will need a second.
Second, Ellen.
Okay, I've heard Ellen second. Okay, is there any discussion? Okay, so we will need someone, let's see, sorry. So I'll do a roll call vote of everyone, and if you'll just say whether or not you vote yay or nay. And I will go down the list. Aaron?
Yay.
Ellen?
Yay.
John?
Yay.
Megan?
Yay.
Will?
Yay.
Okay, so therefore we will proceed with the meeting. So what we're going to do on the agenda, I've kind of put in some space for us to review the agenda and look to see if there's any space. There's some places where we don't have anyone really to lead the items. And so we wanted to see if there's anybody who wanted to facilitate any of the agenda items that we have listed. Or if there are points of discussion not listed on the agenda, please feel free to propose those so we can acknowledge that and we can make time for it on our agenda today.
There are members.
I'm happy to be chair POC caucus regarding potential caucus nominee.
Okay,
Lead that.
thank you. Thank you, John. Okay. Anyone else? And staff chime in as well, please.
Sorry, I was muted. I'm happy to just give a quick update on the restorative practice working group. We haven't had a chance to meet yet, but we did talk to Nicole a little bit. So yeah, I don't think we have too much to cover, but I'm happy to guide that discussion.
Okay, thank you, Trey. And thank you, John.
Trey, I can also lend a little bit of discussion around that as well too, so when the time comes.
Okay,
Definitely.
thank you, Megan. Anyone else?
Hey, this is Aaron. I can lead the discussion for shared analysis and learning model.
Okay. Perfect. Ellen, was there anything that you wanted to take lead on?
I not really, but I
Okay, that's fine. No, that's totally fine. I just wanted to make sure I recognized you. That's all.
Thanks.
Uh-huh. Okay. So, obviously, as we have stated on plenty of our other meetings, that we are going to kind of have more of an informal session. So that's why I think it's important that we lay out, obviously, our agenda and then see who will facilitate that section. So with that said, I believe the first order of business then after on item B, small b, discussion of shared analysis, the informational learning model, and then present works for consideration. Aaron, if you don't mind kind of starting us off with that, please.
Yeah, sure. So just to give some context for those who haven't been part of our previous meetings, we are kind of looking for a way to maybe open the meetings with a discussion around topics, some, to kind of help with our continued learning and continued education as a team around issues of racism, and kind of prompted by cultural artifacts, podcasts, articles that we've read, things like that we can all read together and then come back and discuss collectively. We have not moved forward with kind of how to manage that. We've talked about having a shared list or compiling a shared list that we can kind of work through as things come up. People can add things to the list, which is, I think, probably something that we can discuss together as a committee. So I don't, at the moment, we don't have any works to present for consideration, but I would like to open up the conversation to ideas about how we might manage that effectively, if anybody has any thoughts.
I have thoughts. I thank you, Aaron. I think I enjoy that we would put a list together, have a repository, and then just decide. The only thing is, because the landscape of systemic racism and white supremacy fluctuates consistently in this, in the larger setting and in the local setting, just whatever we do, I would love to leave space for, if something of import happens before we need a notice for the meeting, we can add that like right up to the time, if that makes any sense. So we might plan to do, let's say we plan to read chapters from X Kimby's Stand from the Beginning, but something very crucial in the local or maybe even national scape happens. I would just, whatever we do, I would just like to give us space to be able to pivot and turn and adjust expectations accordingly. You see what I'm saying?
So John, what I'm hearing you say is that you want us to make sure that we're nimble enough to pivot if the need arises.
That's and also be able to adjust our expectation levels, meaning that if we plan for a month to read chapters from a book and then something happens that's super pertinent to the work a week before our meeting, that we will then make a joint committee decision and say, hey, instead of letting this be our learning touchstone, let's switch to this, but also understand that if I had a month to prepare one thing, a week might not be adequate time enough for me to get up to speed on the new piece of media. So that's what I'm saying.
Would it be helpful, instead of kind of compiling a long list and working through that, would it be helpful if we kind of rotate people who are willing to lead that discussion and can offer something, maybe the meeting previous, and then perhaps they lead the discussion or introduce the discussion in the next meeting?
I think that's a good idea. I think that makes it member driven. And whereas everyone has a responsibility, but there would be more responsibility put on one member of the committee that would facilitate that learning. So yeah, I'm interested in a model that looks like that.
Ellen, I agree. And I don't know that we necessarily would have to put on the agenda for the public, the notice of the public meeting, the exact topic we're going to discuss, but just have it as a time for the team members to all share, in the analysis and the learning.
I think that could be totally possible. I could just add it to the agenda as informational session, similar to, a call to order or something in that regard.
So is that going to be kind of like a consistent agenda item that could be held for that space? So I guess if we do have someone who's sharing a resource, we talk about it then, and then like John is saying, if we pivot to something relevant to now, that would be kind of that saved space in each meeting. Is that kind of how that would work?
Yeah, that would be the goal. I think the idea is to kind of get us into the mindset of doing the work, collectively as, we individually and kind of personally reflect on that and then come together collectively, and kind of gets us into the mindset of the work, whether that's, something that was introduced or a pertinent topic for that week.
Just to piggyback on that, yeah, I mean, I total agreement, and also the idea of really of team life. A lot of the training that we had in the first 2 years of the committee on building team life and taking on exercises in this way, and discussing shared viewpoints or contrasting viewpoints of particular items that were pertinent to the work. And I think that I'm really interested in helping build that as we move the work forward.
I think it's great to do that as a team, because I know a lot of team members, we do that with other members of the team outside of the team. So it'd be really cool if the whole team was working together, sharing views on whatever topics we choose.
Should we go ahead and set up what we will discuss for our next meeting?
Yeah, I wondered if maybe we would want to see or have somebody volunteer, and then give them a couple of days to find something, and then perhaps they could send an email or something with the material or a link or whatever it is, if that's possible.
Would anyone like to volunteer?
This is Janine. Hi, everybody. I'd love to volunteer and maybe just work with one other person to just check, just to check in with about it.
Thank you, Janine.
Megan, I'm happy to be the secondary person for check-in with you, Janine.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Megan.
Okay, so you guys will get us some materials?
Yes, indeed. We'll check in. Yeah, I'll follow up with Megan this week.
Okay. Thank you. Aaron, is there anything else on this that we need to discuss?
Nope, I think that's it. I guess one question about communicating that out is that we'll need to be conscious of the sunshine rules around all of that, I think, don't we?
Yes. Mm-hmm. So I think to Ellen's point, having it to where, it's on the agenda, we know what it is and whatever we're coming to the table with, but Grace can send that out to us.
And it's also my understanding, just to clarify, so for example, Janine and Megan can send out the information to the commissioners as long as then Paula and Will, generally I blind copy them on everything just so it cuts out any potential, but yeah, as long as there's no outside discussion with both commissioners about the work of the committee, I believe we're good to sort of share out materials. I will double check on, say, if it's Paula's week, whether or not her sending an article to everyone would be considered discussion. Or Will, for that matter. So I'll put that on my to-do list for next time for clarification.
But we're sending out materials, but the discussion happens in the open meeting.
Right, yes,
Okay.
exactly.
Will, did you want to chime in?
I don't think there's anything wrong with you sending the group materials.
Okay.
Including me. I don't think that's a violation of the, because it's not a discussion.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you all for your work on this. So big B, small c, art team regarding best practice and clarifying the work of driving the agendas, facilitating meetings, and continuing momentum. We don't have anyone to facilitate this, but would you guys like to discuss this in a little bit more detail?
And I will clarify, since I pulled this from our minutes from last time, this was a point of just continuing to discuss the proposed structure of consensus of the committee building the agenda and just making sure that our processes felt good and comfortable and were working for everyone as well.
This is Megan. I think that this might be a good point to come back to next month and check in on again, since we haven't had as much time to put into practice some of the things we've been talking about.
I was gonna say, can we table it? But yeah, that's I think so too. I'd like more of the committee to be present to address this. I'm down for waiting as well.
I agree because I think too many people are missing.
Ms. Bounce, welcome.
Hi, everyone.
So I will just add that I think in terms of even how we're moving about from a psychological standpoint, groups go through 5 different stages, if you will. And the first one is forming, the second one is storming, then you're norming, so you kind of find your normal space, then you start to perform, and then you adjourn. So I'm thinking that we are, as a group and as a team, kind of processing and moving through the exact textbook phases that a normal group would go through. So I just want to commend everybody for all of that, because we are working through all of this. So thank you. Okay, so we will table the rest of that discussion until our next meeting. So next on our agenda, the CARE Caucus regarding a potential caucus model for CARE. And John, if you would take over from here.
Thank you very much. So we have been talking about this for a while, and we were able to run it past we being the POC caucus, were able to run it by the members of the White Caucus as well. I would propose the People of Color Caucus. We meet every Wednesday. We have a standing meeting. We meet 3 of the 4 Wednesdays out of the month. Of course, one of those Wednesdays being the day that we all meet as a committee. And I would love it if one of those caucuses we could invite Paula to be a part of that, of one of those caucuses pulling forward. And especially, Paula, I'm very curious to see what your experience was like caucusing during the training that you had over the weekend as well. And also that the White Caucus would do the same, that they would invite Will to one of those caucus meetings. I don't know what caucusing is, but I can only speak for the caucus that I'm a part of, and we have 3, and just really designing which date per month that Paula would come and join us. And I feel like we hit a stumbling block again because we have to report out. So that's where things get sticky, because we report out. It would the People of Color Caucus reporting out to the members of the White Caucus, and I don't know how that plays with the Sunshine Law. I think we had somebody else in the People of Color Caucus, if you could help me, because I think that we had a solution to that. But that's essentially that's our plan, and that's up for 2 things. I wanna ask you, particularly Paula, if you could talk a little bit about what your experience was caucusing over the past weekend, and if there are other members of the POC caucus who could back me up with how did we decide we were going to handle reporting out, because that's an essential part of the process.
Hey, John.
Yeah.
I've got the notes from that up. I can speak to that a little bit.
Thank you.
Yeah, so this is Megan, and so what we had discussed was inviting commissioners and staff to the caucus session each month, and figuring out what day that would make sense for. We do want to make sure that it is understood that the invitation is personal, that caucus itself is not necessarily tied to the CARE structure, but is instead about stepping outside of the structure to intentionally address issues that come up in the work, are contextual to our experiences, to the work we do in the wider world, and are also just kind of about building team life and getting to know each other as people and where we are moving forward through things. So we did address the challenge with the Sunshine Law and the inclusion of commissioners, in contrast to what are often very personal, intimate, and challenging discussions. So one of the things that we looked at is the possibility that we would write the report out within the individual caucuses. So within the People of Color Caucus and the White Affinity Caucus, we would write a report out together as a group. But that only one representative from that caucus would email the other members of the other caucus. And that if there are questions or requests for clarity, that could be taken, emailed to that single representative and then taken back to caucus. So I would love some thoughts on if that makes sense, if that is a way to have a dialogue while still kind of preserving privacy. John?
Yeah, I have a question, just, and this is more, you weighed in on this last one, Will. Would that look like discussion? And my next question becomes, could we block it? And then it is what it is. We can just send the report out, and then we don't have to do, then we don't have to make sure there's one person, you know, in that way. So
hey, John, this is Will. There's nothing wrong with you guys. As long as you're not an arts commissioner, you can communicate with the group. So you could forward whatever you'd like. Paul and I are the two that need to be careful. When I communicate anything to the group, I'm also communicating things to Paula. And if there's anything substantive that we're discussing, it has to be in a public meeting. But the beauty of this committee in some ways is that you guys don't have to, you're not subject to the open meetings requirement. So y'all could communicate with us as a group, and I don't believe there's any problem with it. Paul and I can't chime in. We would have to speak in a public meeting. Does that sound right to you, Grace?
okay, hold on. Sorry, Grace. I understand all that. And so what we're asking is, you're a member of the White Caucus, and I'm a member of the POC Caucus. We are a group. We are groups within the group. So we are talking a document that would be representative of what the group has discussed. I am aware of the structure of the committee and the structure of the status of the commissioners. So what I'm asking is, and you seem to have answered, is that if we present a report as a People of Color Caucus with Paula included, then we cannot actually send that we can't report that out to a caucus that you also are part of. Is that true?
I'm thinking about that.
I think, hi, it's Caroline. I'm jumping in. I think information sharing is fine as long as that same information is available publicly somewhere.
And I'm going to echo Caroline on that point. It's the same as, yes, you can share information with the larger group, and as long as it's just putting out the report, it's fine. If I comment to the report and Paul is involved in that email exchange, that would be a violation of the Open Meetings Act. So John, if you send something to me, don't expect me to respond to it except in the context of a meeting, because I can't.
Understandable.
This is Ellen. I have another question about caucusing. When we were doing it as art team, the White Affinity Caucus and the People of Color Caucus had the same question or issue or topic. But now we're kind of disjointed, like we don't know what you guys are discussing. You don't know what we discuss in our caucus. So are we going to continue that, or do we need to come up with a common question or topic like we used to?
Yeah. Is that a question for me?
Yeah.
So Ellen, I think that if we keep the model that we're proposing, where we still meet 3 times a month, actually twice, because I think one of those is reserved for our team. So the one caucus that we do is open that the corresponding commissioner participates in, I think that we should come up with caucus questions, and it would be more structured than what we've been doing in the last few months. Yes, your question, to answer your question, yes.
I would just jump in. This is Sarah, and I echo what John said. And I think we would just have to reword it because, you know, the caucus model is like very specific to answering a question in different groups, right? People of color and a white caucus, and then coming back and using that as a model to kind of address issues, challenges, that kind of thing. And so I think if we're not going to use it as that kind of tool, if that's just not possible because of the open meeting, you know, I mean, the restrictions that we have in place, maybe calling it affinity groups, just so, I don't know. And I just want to put that out there because I know caucusing is a very specific kind of way of coming together and addressing challenges and issues and concerns.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's also important for the process of reporting out that we are focused on the same question so that we know that we're responding to similar things.
I agree.
So one difference I see is when we were caucusing initially, the topics or questions were pretty much related to building team life, right? To doing the work within our group. But there's so many things, social things happening now that I can see where what we call caucusing might need to incorporate what's going on outside of our little group, which, you know, the topic may change between the time we decide a question we want to explore and the time we actually meet. I mean, do you see it being a little different than when we're doing it as art team?
Do you think just with the nature of the work that we're doing together, I do think it is one of those where it's not always just going to be about our individual team life. I do think it is going to be about having conversations about the larger ecosystem we're a part of. And I will say, you know, like this part of it is fluid. Those of us who have done caucus for a while are familiar, but it's going to be like that question is going to be a little bit different every time. It's not necessarily that we're always going to deal with the same question or the same topic. That too will shift over time, but we'll always go into caucus with a particular question. We'll always come out with a particular report back.
Hi, may I ask a question? If you don't mind. So this has been great to sit here and see and hear what you're working on. My one question is, how did you determine that you wanted to have two separate caucuses? What is the purpose and the desired end of having a people of color caucus and having a white affinity group?
I can speak to this a little bit. This is Megan, and the rest of the art team, please feel free to chime in. But so the purpose of drawing two different caucus, a people of color caucus and a white affinity caucus, is to address conversations specifically looking within the lens of like internalized racial oppression, which applies to the people of color caucus. And then I can never remember the acronym for the white affinity caucus, so someone jump in on that one for me. But
IRS, superiority.
Thank you, John. But essentially, so it's looking at the ways in which our behavior has essentially been trained by society and by the structures we find ourselves in with white supremacy, and kind of analyzing and deconstructing and building healthy response to changing the way that shows up. So the idea that we've all been trained a certain way, so we respond in certain ways when we have triggers that happen. And this is really about analyzing and stepping back and making sure we're not just reacting, that we're actually responding and looking at it fully. Does that help explain a little bit? I can go a little more if so.
It explains a little bit. I guess that it also creates another question, which is, as you're in these two separate groups, is the goal to come together? Is there a collective piece that you all want to work on ultimately to demonstrate the perspectives?
So that is part of where the report out comes from with the caucus. It's so coming in with the same question and really investigating how we're showing up in it. And then with the report out, it's about communicating what's happening with the different groups and what's kind of been thought through. It's designed to do that way so it's a little bit more neutral. It's not one person saying, like being outed in front of a bunch of other people, but instead about ways we can kind of call each other in. There's usually space to ask for clarification as well, or for more information in that report out. So that was part of why we were trying to figure out what the best way to handle report out was going to look like. Let's see, I'm trying to make sure I've answered all the questions.
Well,
in terms of, Sarah, do you want to jump in?
Well, and I was just going to jump in and say, you know, this model of caucusing is something that we used previously before kind of being part of this formalized group. And so we're navigating, that's part of the conversation today, is like navigating how to do this when we have public facing meetings, open meetings, and what does that look like? And so I think this process hasn't necessarily been designed with that in mind. And so that's kind of part of these conversations is like, how do we fit the processes we've been using to share out, to have conversation around the questions that we had, our conversations in a space that is productive and also honest. So I just wanted to share that too.
Also, I want to follow up on that and say that this was something that we were trained to do within the Crossroads training that we've been doing. So they may also be a really good resource to reach out to and see if they've had other groups that have had to make a similar transition. They may have information on that or advice.
And so is the ultimate goal, is this mostly about understanding intellectually where people are coming from? Or is there an application artistically that is to come out of this?
We haven't explored doing any kind of art practice around it, but that is kind of exciting to me. A lot of it is about connecting intellectually, but also connecting in a very human and emotional way. Again, like looking at places where we're triggered or we're defensive or we struggle with something, and finding through the help of perspectives from other people within the particular caucus, finding kind of a place of humanization for the larger group. So it is very much based in group life, but it has been incredibly helpful for us working through some fairly challenging issues as we've been growing as a team. So.
But I also think the ultimate goal would be that as a working group, we feel unified and comfortable enough with one another to be able to discuss the hardest issues with everyone in the room and not need to separate racially or whatever. I mean, that's the ultimate goal of any work you do in this type of work.
Okay, that question. You guys just do something artistic. I know I would be very excited to see how that would come together.
That's a fun idea. Like, I don't know what that would look like yet, but that does kind of intrigue me. Thank you for putting that out there.
You're welcome.
John, is there anything else you want to explore around this item?
No, like I said, just how, is there anything, and I don't even, because I haven't had the training in a year. How is this online with the way they presented caucusing in the training that you attended this past weekend?
I don't think that they didn't do what you guys have been discussing. And I don't know if it was a particular session that I was in, whether or not it was just the way it was broken. We did breakout groups, but the whole leaning in and you kind of talk, we didn't really go into that. So that's why I said there's a couple more that I want to attend to see whether or not, like, that was a good starting point, but let me see what this deeper work is that you guys are talking about. But they're only limiting it to Saturday school, so I've got to really think about how that works. And then, and the other thing is, we didn't spend, it wasn't that big of a group. There might have been less than 20 participants, including the 3 facilitators. And we had breakout discussions, but not to the degree that you guys.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Um,
I don't. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mick.
I was going to say that that was helpful to hear, and I would love to have you in the caucus, Paula, and show that in practice.
I proposed that we will let, if we confer as a caucus and we decide which one, and then we being members of the People of Color Caucus can decide, and conferring with the other members of the White Affinity Caucus, we'll decide where. Probably would be 2 weeks from now. That's that's my guess, but I can't speak for anybody else. But there'll be more. Have anything else today?
Okay. Thank you for that. And thank you for inviting me. I would love to participate in it. Okay, so we will revisit this again during our next meeting. Trey and Megan, do you want to take over the Restorative Practice Working Group check-in? Thank you, John, for walking us through the care process, the POC.
So, yeah, I'll just say a few things. I know we haven't had a chance to meet yet, so I can take the lead, John and Aaron and Megan, and I'll coordinate with Terry as well, and try to get a time as well that Nicole can join us. Nicole, she's doing a lot of work with restorative justice right now, but is also very, I guess her workload is really tight, so she doesn't have a huge capacity to kind of take this on in a way. So I'll be kind of leading the staff effort, but definitely taking a lot of pointers from Nicole and Janine especially. Megan, I'm not sure if you wanted to add anything. I know, just to reiterate and make sure we're on the same path, this restorative working group is kind of meant to evaluate ways that Metro Arts can look to kind of improve their relations with communities and encourage growth within and growth and partnership within especially communities of color and underserved communities, if that's correct. Does that sound like the goal? John, Megan, Aaron?
I think so. I think it was kind of within restorative practice, not just within Metro Arts, but also within the community. So we discussed a little briefly, we met as an art team to talk about the caucus issue, and the work group came up as well. And so there were a few questions that came from that discussion. So my apologies, Trey, that this is the kind of the first you're hearing of it.
No worries.
Yeah, and we don't have answers to this. This is just kind of the things that we were thinking we might start to check in with, or start to work around and start to answer. So looking specifically within Metro Arts, we wanted to get a sense of what restorative practice meant for and within Metro Arts, within expectations, just because, you know, it's a term that gets thrown around a lot, and we want to make sure that everybody's on the same page, that we all have the same analysis for it. And we also want to look and understand what the context of the work that HR already does or does not do, and where that falls into those expectations. And then in terms of thinking about it within internal restorative practice, where does what we can, as a committee, can do support that work? Basically, where does the work of HR end, and where does our work begin, or vice versa? And then you all had mentioned caucusing within a work environment, and so we wanted to hear a little bit more about that experience, to see what your work caucus looked like, and then see how our experience maybe can help that space be more effective and avoid potential harm. You know, just trying again to like understand what it looks like within an organization that we get glimpses of, but we don't have the day-to-day of. So yeah, so those are kind of 3 questions that we wanted to see if that was a good starting point, and to see how people felt about that, and we can discuss more within like a smaller work group, but that's kind of the things that were brought up about what this could look like.
Oh, sorry, I was speaking on mute again. If it's okay with you all, I can try to schedule a time and maybe get a debrief from you all on those questions, and possibly get Nicole on the table, and then maybe we can report back on this next month as well.
That sounds great. Yeah, we can. I can drop an email after the meeting is done today, or at least by tonight, and we can go ahead and start figuring out what a scheduled time for that would look like.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anything else that we need to discuss regarding restorative practice working groups?
I think we're good.
Okay. One of the things I'm starting to hear as we're discussing all of these pieces is that we're almost having subcommittees being developed. And so I'm seeing the themes that we can probably start to use on our agenda on a month-to-month basis, right? And because we're kind of keep re-going, well, obviously we can look at it again and revisit it, but I hear it sounds like there's a consistency of certain items that are kind of driving our meetings.
And hopefully correspond the priorities that we laid out. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think I think we said we were going to revisit those every either 3 or 6 months. So it may be towards the, maybe not our next meeting, but the meeting after that, we come back and see where we are in terms of what the work has been doing and how it correlates. Is that fair? All right. So staff update.
I'm happy to step in on the first part, and I'll let Trey do the second. I just wanted to update the committee. I know you all requested several bits of information. And I have to apologize, I was very overconfident and how quickly we as a group could turn those out. Both Trey and Janine have quite a bit on their plates, and I have to admit, I'm still new enough that I don't quite know all the ins and outs, but we are still working on getting those overviews to you. And then also I just wanted to reiterate that our handbook, like our employee handbook, is currently being approved by HR. So as soon as we get that back and they've made their updates, I will send that out to y'all so that you can review and kind of see what that structure looks like.
Super helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Grace.
And then, oh, sorry. Thank you, Grace. For the public art team, we've recently been talking about our public art guidelines. Our public art guidelines are a document that we use to kind of guide our percent for art projects and kind of the process that we use to select artists and procure different artists. And basically it guides our PAC committee. It tells us what kind of criteria we have to have on our selection panels, the members who consist of that, who's qualified, and our definition of a professional artist and things like that. So that's just something that we've been talking about looking at and possibly making adjustments where we can, if possible, that might just make it more equitable. So we don't have a official working process for that yet. We have a public art team meeting this coming week, in which I think we're gonna, talk about it as a team for the first time in depth. So hopefully next month I'll have more of an idea about what what type of process we're thinking about in terms of how, what are the ways that we look at the guidelines now, propose changes, or things like that. So I'll definitely be able to give an update on that next month, but I did want to mention that, you know, we have talked about getting CARE involved in that process, just to kind of have an outside look at, you know, to see what someone else thinks about our process. So it wouldn't be too in-depth. I don't think we would ask for too much. But in the coming weeks, that would be something that could be an opportunity for this group. So I don't want to, you know, have you sign up and, you know, make you commit to doing something specific right now. But if you are interested, I would definitely like to, you know, take note and, you know, follow up with you in the coming weeks as we start to, you know, iron out what that process looks like. So yeah, no need to, you know, reach out now, but if you are interested, say something, shoot me an email or a text, or yeah, definitely.
Trey, why don't we have you come back next month and kind of give some more, and then we can see who wants to dive in.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Trey.
Thank you.
That's intriguing. I'm excited.
Thanks, Megan.
Any other staff updates? Janine, Caroline?
Sure. I'll let you start, Caroline, about our groups that are forming and some work that we're doing. Well, or I guess I'm unmuted, so I'll just go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, Janine. You got it.
Thank you. Cool. So just to give you an update on Real, I've been in touch with the with Wilna at the Curb Center, and this is a big evaluation year of the work that has been done in Real with the previous 4 cohorts. So currently, Real is, currently Curb is formulating some questions, and there was a previous survey, so it'll probably be largely based on the previous survey and just like getting updates from alumni. And then after those are done, we'll get back together and confirm the questions, and then Metro Art staff will follow up with Real alumni for that. So that's exciting. Also, in the process of working with the Porch and Crossroads Antiracism on a modified or not a modified, but a hybrid anti-racism training and writing workshop that'll extend over 6 weeks, and that's working on that for the fall. So that's still very much forming right now. And also, well, I'll share this update with Caroline. I have a meeting next week with the current board chair of the Arts Administrators of Color. And so they have an initiative of expanding their chapters. They're based in Washington, D.C., and have like really robust membership and, you know, really well attended, well resourced conference annually. It's online this year, of course. And so yeah, their initiative is to start chapters in cities across the United States. So I'm checking in with them next week. So I will have more of an update. These are all sort of still forming, but I'll have more of an update on that next month. But any questions? Yeah, so and more details later. So I'll hand it to Caroline.
Thank you, Janine.
Hey everyone, thanks for letting me join today. Yeah, so in collaboration with Janine, we've also developed, we're having a hard time deciding what the name should be, but sort of a white accountability group for arts leaders. I think we may start with sort of executive directors of organizations to sort of get at the leaders who have the most, I guess, sort of ability to make changes in their institution. Not that other people don't, but that's what we're thinking, but we're collaborating with the Arts and Business Council to sort of co-facilitate this group. So we're working on an invitation to go out hopefully very soon, this week or next week. And we have also identified through Janine's team a facilitator who might be able to help us with that, just getting some structure around that and creating some accountability systems with the Arts Administrators of Color group that Janine is working on. So I know this had been kind of picked up at one point by Metro Arts and others, and then kind of dropped, and it's been kind of an idea that we wanted to pursue, but we haven't really had the resources, staff capacity lately. But we were hoping with Arts and Business Council's expertise and sort of facilitating just getting groups together and registrations and things like that, that would be helpful. So that's what we're working on there, amongst all the many other things that Janine mentioned, and I'm happy to answer questions if you have any.
I have a question about the arts administrators, the white affinity group of exec. Is there a threshold for how large the organizations are? Or are you targeting specific people? How large of a group?
Well, yeah, that's why we started. We're going to start with executive leadership and then go from there. I think we don't know how big this group will be, so we're going to kind of have a come one, come all. Let's see who shows up, and then we might have breakouts from there. But we haven't, until we know who's kind of really in the work and wanting to do this. It'll be hard to say if we want to have like, okay, big, larger organizations, kind of like we do our grant allocations. We have, thresholds there where it's like $5 million annual budget and above. But I think what we found through the COVID process and having a lot of calls with organizations is that, oftentimes the largest organization is learning from the smallest organization and vice versa. So that, cross-pollination is important too. So I think we don't have a set idea of what that could look like. And we do know, just from a staff capacity standpoint, we can't manage, just like groups upon groups and like a really large group. So that was one reason we went with ABC. And well, I think we'll just kind of wait and see how this goes over the fall, and then really come back, hopefully around January with a solid plan of like, okay, what do we need to do here? Do we have too many people? Do we have to do some breakouts or something like that?
Thank you. Thank you, Caroline. I think it's exciting, but also I wanted to know, how does that work in conjunction with Real? Meaning, if I'm a member, if I'm a leader of a larger institution and I feel like I don't have the time commitment for Real, is this something that, because it's tailored for them, is this something that executive directors at companies who don't have the time commitment available for Real could attend and invest in and get things that they can bring back to their organizations?
I think so. And I think we'll, once we kind of get a little deeper into what Real is going to look like, I think this could be a landing place for both. I mean, it could be like you've been through Real and now you want to do some additional work and have some additional accountability, or you haven't been through Real and you don't even know, you haven't even started doing this work yet. So you can kind of drop in. I think it will have to evolve with Real and all of our equity programs so that it makes sense. And I think that was one reason we had hesitated as Metro Arts to take it on, because we can't do everything, but this felt like a really, emergent need right now that we're, people want to have these conversations and they want to do additional learning and educating themselves. But I think for us, just talking internally with the staff, accountability is important. I don't really need, we don't need to have another group where everyone's just kind of sitting around talking about it and not moving toward systems change. So I think we have to sort of make sure that all of these are building blocks to ultimate goals that we have from this group, from Real, so I think I don't have a complete answer, but I think it all has to kind of work in tandem for sure.
Oh, that's it. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
So this is Megan, and I also want to tap in. I know that it looks a little nebulous now, but I would love to be kept in the loop about SCARE and what that accountability ends up looking like, because I think we are aware that there, equity and inclusivity and all of that are very much buzzwords right now, and are being thrown around by institutions as buzzwords. So I would love to see the real operational ways that these are going to manifest.
This is Diane. I went to a couple meetings of another white affinity group that was mostly arts, that was totally not facilitated by people who understood different cultures and cultural norms. So I would like to be sure that this one, the facilitation, can stress the intersection of arts and cultural expression, because we have such diversity in Nashville. And a lot of times they talk about just Black and white Americans, right? But our communities are so much more diverse than just that. And many of them are left out. So I would like to be sure that people understand the intersection between art and cultural expression.
Great. We'll definitely take that and make a note. Well, we're happy to answer the questions about that, and/or just feel free to email me. We'll be sending out, some communications, and we'll see where this takes us.
Well, thank you to all the staff for all the work that they've been doing to kind of carry this forward and to kind of broaden it out beyond just this committee. So appreciate your hard work and your dedication to this. Being mindful of our time, we're about at 5:15. According to our agenda, we have about 15 minutes left. Are there any additional points of discussion that we need to bring forth? And I'll just kind of open the floor to anybody.
There was neglect mention while we were talking about the caucusing process. We did also talk about, we want to invite staff into that process as well. And so not just the two commissioners, but also members of staff to the corresponding caucus, to their corresponding caucuses. So that was important, and I completely forgot. So thank you.
Hey, thank you, John. We appreciate the invitation. Looking forward to meeting up.
One additional point, this is Megan, that I wanted to bring up that came up during kind of the art team discussion. We were talking about caucus and everything. And Ellen, feel free to jump in. This speaks to a point. You were doing work gathering information on BIPOC-led organizations, and you had raised some points of dialogue that perhaps the care team, I think, can talk about, that we could definitely use support from the Metro team as well. So thinking about that, the idea of like having a better understanding of what the scoring metric is for who those organizations are considered to be and how that affects funding, to understand what qualifies BIPOC-led, and whether it is the focus of BIPOC engaged is on demographics, presence, and staff, within leadership specifically, and or in the demographics served. And I can email this to you, Grace. How many of these organizations still have BIPOC and staff and leadership positions after COVID? Because we know that there have been a lot of layoffs and furloughs. And then also, this speaks a little bit to some of the work that you all are already doing as staff in terms of developing a consistency of equity approach in practices among staff as well as in the communities served. Among these organizations that have BIPOC staff or serve BIPOC communities, but which are primarily white affinity led in terms of leadership. But yeah, I can email those to you, Grace, as well. And like I said, Ellen, jump in if there was something that I didn't capture.
I think you captured it. We were talking about organizations of color that are led or founded by white people, like my organization, right? And then organizations that, are they considered BIPOC led because their board is predominantly people of color, or because their staff, or are they identified that way because of who they serve? And if so, making sure that they're serving them in the most culturally appropriate way. those are some of the things we discussed.
That would be wonderful if y'all could send me those sort of questions and points of discussion, definitely, because I think that those are important avenues to follow through on.
Well, and I think we also, if our position is that white-led and organizations, if we're saying that for equity, we have to give up some to give to others, and that maybe an organization that's considered an organization of color ranks higher because it's an organization of color, and a white organization ranks lower because they are not or don't serve, do not have enough people of color on their board or in their staff. If that's our position, then we need to give the staff good solid reasoning so they can explain why one organization might have lost funding and another one may have gained funding based on equity principles. And if that's not our position, then we need to have real clear, fair guidelines about how those choices are made when organizations are reviewed and ranked.
So Ellen, what I'm hearing you say is that's probably something that we need to solidify as a committee to figure out what that lens looks like.
Yeah, I mean, I think to do equity work, you have to, I was just thinking of the meeting, I was listening to the dialogue about organizations that lost funding, ones that gained. I just feel like if for true equity, some people have to give up something, right? Organizations of privilege, people of privilege might have to give up something to make things equitable. And if that's our position, then we need to have clear dialogue, research, principles that the staff can, or whoever can explain the situation. And if that's not our, what we're striving for, I just feel like there needs to be consistency, understanding, continuity, so that everyone's expressing things the same way in a way that makes people understand that to get equity, this is what we're doing and why we're doing it. If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. This is Janine. I'll jump in. Ellen, in your conversations, were you thinking that this would be another subcommittee, or would this, I'm also thinking that, at some point there needs to be a check-in between CARE and the Grants and Funding Committee, where they, annually review guidelines for each of our, grant and all funded, all programs that award funding that are, not public art. So I just wanted to know if there were some thoughts or discussion around that.
So I lost you for a minute there, Janine.
Oh. Sorry about that. So I guess question one is, are you thinking that this would be like another working group? That's one question. And then question two is, were there also thoughts or plans to connect with the Grants and Funding Committee at some point and figuring that out, obviously, like how to cross committee meet? So I just wanted to know if there were discussions or thoughts around that currently.
This is Sarah. I don't think we've had group discussions around that, but I know that, that's definitely part of the work that we want to do, is make sure that this work is integrated in all aspects of the arts, Metro Arts's work. And so I could definitely see that being a step moving forward of, how is equity being integrated in the review process, and then what is prioritized and what is not, and then what is the language that is being used to communicate the decisions that are made to all grantees and applicants, to make it just really clear, what's going on there. But I don't know if Ellen or anybody else has any other thoughts though too.
Yeah, I just think it's important to have a common language, a common understanding, and that the commissioners are all on board with understanding what it takes sometimes to have equity.
Janine, when is the next grants review process? The guidelines review?
The guidelines review
Mhm.
will be in the October meeting,
Okay.
or the beginnings of it. So we had it's like a two-part kind of thing where we introduce some ideas and have discussions and then solidify in the November meeting is the typical process.
So it would probably be beneficial then if this needs to happen, it probably needs to happen during this month of September, this review process. So that
That
these questions are addressed and so that the grant schedule can stay on
correct.
track.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Grace, is it possible for you to send us the current guidelines?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Janine, I know you and Marissa are working on them.
We have a draft going. I think we can correct a few things, but send off, as early as tomorrow, some sort of
Okay.
working draft for you all to review. So I'll get that to you tomorrow, Grace.
And then, Janine, when would you need to have feedback?
So this is more of a Grace question, actually. She keeps me on schedule in regards to the meetings and everything. We would probably need to give the committee members, I think typically just about a week to go over some of the, some of the changes that we're proposing, understanding that there's going to be discussion time within that meeting. So yeah, about a week ahead of time. So I guess we have until the third week of this month. That's coming up.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Then how would the committee like to go forward with this space?
Hey, this is Will. Because we don't really have time to do a whole lot as a group, what if we designate one commissioner and some art team members to a subcommittee that reviews and makes recommendations? And that way we don't have to deal with formal notices and formal meetings. It does deprive the larger group of input in it. I mean, I guess the other alternative is we could have a group meeting to go over just that issue.
Well, and then I have a question for those of us who do get grant funding. We should probably not really have anything to do with the guidelines.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think if you abstained from a vote, and since we don't really have a vote, I believe we would welcome your comments as a member of this committee. If you disclose your conflict at the beginning of the discussion, just to remind people, your comments are, there's nothing inappropriate at all with you participating in the discussion. You probably want to recuse yourself from any sort of vote on anything formal. If we decide to have a vote on a check-in or anything, I'd probably just say recuse yourself, but you can discuss.
Yeah, Ellen, I was majority of folks in get some sort of funding. So that would take a lot of y'all out from the conversation.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification, Will. This is Janine. So yeah, that would be helpful. I think, thank you for that.
At the Arts Commission level, I'd say every arts commissioner is a member of some arts nonprofit in some capacity, whether they're on the board of directors or like I do a lot of pro bono service to arts groups. So we have lots of conflicts, and as long as they're disclosed and we recuse ourselves when appropriate, it's fine to have discussion.
Because do the guidelines go out in any language other than English?
So we have the first page of the guidelines. Translation services are available, and that the and anyone can request the guidelines translated in a specific and I don't have it in front of me, but it's translated into several languages, and I believe those are that they represent many, if not most of the languages in Davidson County. So those are, like taken from census records. But you'll see that on the first page.
Why don't we then, Will, I like your idea of having just a few people kind of maybe, but everybody should read, review, and make recommendations. And then maybe a few individuals kind of come through and say, here's our working doc, and we're recommending this to the grants committee. And just allow them to, it's recommendations. And then next, maybe because our turnaround time is so short, maybe we really commit to doing something much deeper with the grants committee for their next grants review process or grant cycle. My two.
Ellen, I would like to be a part of that, and I have a feeling Terry would.
Repeat that, Ellen.
I know it's echoey, but I would be willing to be a part of that process, and I have a feeling Terry would as well, even though she's not here today to volunteer herself.
And Ellen, I'm happy when I send out the guidelines to also, for the benefit of the members that weren't able to make it today, to say, this is the working group that we have open. Obviously, you are invited.
That's
Will, since you're the legal expert, should you want to volunteer for that as the commissioner?
Whatever you want, Paula. Your wish is my command.
Well, if that's the case, no.
So I'm glad to.
Okay, thank you. Just from a legal standpoint, and that way we can make sure that whatever those recommendations are made, that we don't have to worry about legal coming in and saying anything. Take one step out of that. Okay, we are at 5:30. Are there any other discussion points that we need to bring forth?
I just want to thank everyone for allowing me to be here today.
Well, thank you, Council Lady.
Very helpful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks for staying with us, and we thank you for your continued support of the Arts Commission and the arts community as a whole. And we couldn't do this work without good council folks like you, and so we appreciate your service as well.
Thank you. I'd love for our chair to come back to one of these meetings as well, that she knows that's being done. It only helps us help you when we're all informed about what's going on. Mm-hmm. So I hope you all have a wonderful Labor Day weekend.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye. Before we wrap up, if we can set our next meeting dates. I believe the first Wednesday in October is October 7th. If we're staying on the first Wednesday.
Yes.
That is 5 weeks away though. Do we want to stay with that?
suggest we just,
I like the continuity of having meetings on a regular occurring time. Just that's my personal bias. Makes it easier for me to figure out when the meeting is.
That'll give us time to get our caucusing in order.
And get work done for working groups. I agree, Ellen.
And just for those who are interested, our next film, it'll be streamed virtually on September 15th and the 20th. It's Coded Bias. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's a film, a documentary about the bias in the logarithms in the tech world. And there's going to be a Q&A with the filmmaker immediately following both screenings. So if you're interested, I'll send you the link.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Send it to us.
Okay.
Okay. The only thing is that as of the moment, our virtual meeting order expires on September 30th. I imagine that the discomfort with meeting in person will extend to October. I'm happy for us to plan, like, do like a, okay, if we stay virtual, this is the meeting we'll have. If it's in person, we won't have a meeting, but we'll touch base about action steps. So I'd love the committee's perspective on that, because I apologize for the confusion as we led up to this meeting. Interesting times.
My suggestion for just calendar sake and scheduling is we just stick to the 7th and we figure it out. You know, we wait until the governor says whatever he decides to do, and then, but we just hold it firm on our calendar.
Okay.
If that means that we have to, I don't know, if we figure out another way that we meet virtually, if I don't know if that's even legally possible with Metro, but we'll figure it out.
Yeah, my suggestion is that rather than have Grace try to schedule a in-person meeting or running around at the last minute, our plan is we meet virtually in some sort of legal fashion, and if for some reason that's not possible, then we'll set some sort of real meeting. And that way Grace doesn't have to run around worrying about what's going to happen. We can legally have a distance meeting on Zoom, whatever this is, WebEx, or we cancel that meeting and figure out our next steps.
Yes, I agree. Another question I have for the committee is the time, because I'm noticing that we had a lot of people who weren't able to come today because of work commitments. Do we need to move this back an hour?
I'll say for me that does help, because sometimes my meetings go later, and so the evenings are more open for me. Yeah.
Okay.
I was late today. I had another meeting.
I totally understand. So maybe we should we just try out a 5 o'clock meeting?
I'm all right with that.
It's fine with me.
right with trying a later hour, and I promise to put myself on mute while I snack.
It's okay. You just made us all hungry.
Yeah, this is Janine. I'm fine with that.
Aaron?
I'm try it. I kind of typically, like today I have a rehearsal at 6, so the later it is, the more I work. But I'm willing to give it a shot.
Yeah, I'm willing to give it a shot too. I'm like John. I start at 4 o'clock in the morning, so it gets late.
Or even 4:30, would that be better than 5, John?
I'll try. I mean, I'm facilitating a class at DePaul, and so I have to go by their schedule. So if I can make it, I'll be there. And we'll see what happens.
Yeah, 5 o'clock works for me.
Yeah, Paula, why don't we try 5 and just see how it goes?
Okay. We can just see, and we can move it around until we find that space, but that sweet spot for us all. Okay. Well, I think this completes the business of this meeting. I don't think that we have anything else to discuss. We have our kind of working groups and action items that are going to happen. We've identified who's going to do those items. And then I guess we will come back on October the 7th, if not before, to kind of really go over what we've been discussing today and kind of take it to the next step. So if there's no further business, then this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paula. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Grace.
Thank you all.
Thank you for all the extra
Bye.
work you put, Grace. Thank you.
Oh, I'm more than happy to do it. Y'all are so wonderful.
Have a good night, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.